5 minutes with Sean, maybe 10. Today it's with Sean and guests. I am back in sit down mode after a couple weeks of talking and, doing it on my own, riding solo. We're back talking with a crew of folks on a very, very, very important topic to me, extremely important. And for anyone who doesn't know who's on the show today, we have Jonathan Lampros. Jonathan, how are you, man?
Fantastic. Thank you, Tom. Appreciate you having me.
Thank you for coming on. We do appreciate it. And the illustrious Patrick Moore. Patrick, how are you, pal?
Awesome. Good to see you. Let's get
Good to see you again, too. You're still my most I'd never been so nervous for an interview in my life before when I first interviewed Patrick, ever, because he had already sent me the prehab map and I was already mind blown, confused. I didn't even know what it was I was looking at. I didn't feel smart enough to talk to the guy. Turned out I was smart enough to do it, and we had ourselves a great show. That's why I look forward to this one. So, Jonathan, I think this whole thing started, in my opinion, with a post that you had made with regards to our industry and addiction in general. So why don't you give us a little background? What led you to make such a post that I jokingly said broke the internet? But what happened with that? How did you get there?
Last year I lost 5 friends, and these are guys that I grew up in the car business with, people that were my age, and 3 of them were, I call it suicide by alcohol, where they literally drank themselves to death. Unfortunately, when somebody dies of alcohol, we never report it as that. They died of pancreatitis, they died of a liver disease or something of that nature, but death by alcohol for sure. And then I had 2 friends commit suicide. And both of those people were, one was on his 4th DUI, just couldn't handle it anymore. And all 5 of these friends were, from the auto business. And myself struggling with addiction, with alcoholism, this hit near and dear to my heart. And so as I've looked at this problem throughout our industry, Rocky's Automotive was like the pinnacle of used car dealerships in the city of Denver. They were somebody that took for less or better was a pot lot, and they turned it into a 500 to 600 car a month store. That was, when I got into the business in the 90s, that was the place that, guys who were, the best of the best were working at and went to work at, and made a lot of money, had a lot of success, and sold a ton of cars out of. Well, in the last 10 years, that dealership is now, I mean, literally the dealership itself is in shambles, has been torn apart. And it really just kind of hit home with me because the people who ran it, the owners, the sales managers, the salespeople, the majority of them are dead. And, again, death by drugs, by alcohol, and suicide as well. There was a couple that died that way, and it really just like rang the bell from the losing the friends over the last year to watching that dealership and its demise. When in a time and an era where used car dealers are reigning supreme, a lot of used car dealers. Well, CarMax is a great example of is bigger than AutoNation, and so you see why in the world would a place like that fall by the wayside like it did? And the answer was drugs and alcohol addiction, and really the devastation that it causes, and then how prevalent it was in the auto business or is in the automobile industry. And as I made that post, it was obvious that it wasn't just the auto industry, it was all industries, and this is quite the devastating thing throughout corporate America, throughout whether it was lawyers or dentists or doctors. It was amazing all the people that commented. And that's how I got in touch with Patrick when he had mentioned a few things, and I got the chance to talk to him. And you want to talk about blowing your mind away.
It
took me,
happens quite easily, doesn't it, with Patrick? I tell
his
you
book
what.
was amazing. It just something else. So really was something.
It's something that, again, looking at it from an industry perspective, right? Who we are. Our industry is full of A-types, right? It's full of have-to-haves. It's guys who are driven by certain things, right? But the one thing that most people lack in the car business is autonomy, okay? And I mean this from a work perspective. You work for someone. You don't necessarily have the autonomy you think you do, right? You sell cars, you're at a dealership 12 hours a day. There's no autonomy. To me, this comes back to autonomy. Patrick Moore, tell us how does our industry attract so much of this? Why is this so prevalent? I know it's everywhere. We all agree to that. But in our industry, we live it every day. Is there a part of our personalities as people who end up in sales, end up in the car business that would have this built in? What's your take, sir?
I was telling Jonathan earlier, a week or two ago, when we started all this, that it's not true that all car salesmen are alcoholics. Only the good ones. And everybody knows this. So yeah, it is a little bit of a, one of the non-medical counseling definitions, and basically what I'm saying is more of a recovery-informed way to describe addiction, is egomania with an inferiority complex. And if you think about it, a good salesman's got to have some ego. Yep. I can go in there. I'm going to help these people. I'm going to communicate effectively. We're going to make a deal. There's nothing I can't overcome if my motives are good. And then there's and people are crazy when they make big decisions. Buying a car is the second biggest decision you're going to make financially outside of a house. And they tend to go crazy in the middle of that process. So you got to have somebody with some confidence that can walk them through that and lay it out for them and sell it and make it happen, make a deal. And then there's always a chance that if you don't, you starve. So you never secure. And as a matter of fact, not every sales situation, but in any telecommunications, I did the car business for a while, but I was in telecommunications mostly. And we were hired by our insecurity. How much pressure do you have on you? How suicidal are you? Because we want the gift of desperation can be monetized.
It's so
true. Yeah.
It's so true. The gift of desperation, the way you say that, Jonathan. How many times you had someone, right, as a sales manager, come in your office, tell you they got a new mortgage or had a baby, and you're like, hell yeah, this guy's got debt. Put his ass out there, get to work, time to make money, right? And he's not wrong when he says it. That's how we did. That's how I was raised. Chicago car business, late 90s. Like if you weren't an egomaniac, you weren't going to survive, right, Jonathan? I mean, you ran into the same thing.
I'll remember my first sales manager telling me, he goes, the best salesman out there was a guy with a what was it, a $5,000 a month nut and a 700 credit score. So he actually cares about making that.
Yep, 700 credit score, and throw in a kid or two, and the motivation is through the roof, right? It is
through the roof, or a good drug habit. They had no problem with one of those. That was always something to be said.
And so, but here we are, right? So you and I have been in the industry 20 plus years, whatever it is. I'm an addict. Okay, it's fine. Patrick knows it. He and I have talked about it. You've admitted your own struggles, but here we are, right? Yeah. We're here. We're not a part of the statistic. We're not a part of the conversation. So my question is why? Well, my answer is what I didn't already know, is that I was on the map of autonomy. I had been working autonomy my whole life. I used drugs and alcohol to an extent where I figured out I was an addict. But then I figured out how to use drugs instead of drugs using me, which I know it sounds bad. Everyone should be drug-free America. I don't live there, okay? I don't. I enjoy a good buzz wherever it comes from, however it comes from it, whether that's closing a deal or microdosing some mushrooms. I enjoy a good time, but I know how to. It's like I know how to use Tylenol. So you'd never tell me to stop using Tylenol because I know how to use it. I know what its purpose is. Patrick, is that me? Is that me being a drug addict in sheep's clothing and just not willing to admit that I seriously can't kick my problem? Or is this a level of control that is necessary for a 40-year-old adult?
It's how you organize your risk benefit factors. If you organize your gifts in such a way to be productive, no, it doesn't matter what you do with drugs. Like you say, you might do this or that or the other, but it's not to survive. It's to entertain, or it's to something else, but it's not to survive. If you're doing it to survive, you're caught. You're caught in the trap, and
You're
it
caught in
will
the
kill
addiction
you.
web, as it were.
Oh yeah, there's no way out unless you're armed with the right facts at the right time, which is kind of what we're trying to figure out how to do. How to do that best.
I
So
agree.
yeah,
And I think the right time is early, right? I think for Jonathan and I think had people come to us in the beginning, right? I mean, look, there's no education in our industry. Jonathan agreed, right? Whether it's training on how to do the job, whether it's training on how to deal with, because outside of sports, let's be honest, there are a few places people I was 18 years old when I made my first 100 grand, okay, in a year at 18 years old. There was no roadmap. There was no, hey, Sean, here's what you should do next. And my parents were fucking terrible with money. Mom and dad love you, but they were not the shining examples of what one should do with money. And great, yeah, I bought my first house when I was 19. That was just because my mattress fell out of places to put shit. I had to do something else. But at the end of the day, Jonathan, we have no training. Do you think that training of new hires, do you think talking along these lines is something helpful? Do you think it's too scary? Do you think that we would never do it anyways because we already don't train on the basics? Jonathan, tell me, how do we introduce it earlier?
Well, I think that would be huge. I really do think that's, in Patrick's book, Prehab, he talks about the B-2 bombers that came back with the bullet holes in them. And the question was asked, where do you put, they were going to put additional armor on these bombers. And they said, where do you put the armor at? And everybody, my assumption automatically was, well, you put it where the bullet holes are. And in fact, the plane made it back with those holes. So that's not with the planes that didn't make it back were the ones that got hit in the other areas. So you have to reinforce the places where you're probably not thinking. And I really do believe when you bring that up, I mean, I'll never forget being, made a GSM or a GM, given a, multi-million-dollar business to run and having zero training, let alone sales training. I mean, we were given no training to, I was $100 million a year business and they're going, hey, good luck.
And
And
you're the
so
best. And
it's
you're the
in,
best sales guy. Has nothing to do with your leadership. Has nothing to do
nope.
with your ability to organize a spreadsheet. Jack shit. You just happened to move the most units, then got moved to a manager who moved the most units, who then fell into. I mean, training is how many owners even have? It's just crazy. So anyway, all
No,
right.
it's
So
crazy.
you're absolutely right.
So I really do believe if we were to, just like, well, I was a huge believer in training because I didn't get any. So I
Agreed.
think if we instituted an actual real program to give that education and make people aware, we begin to reinforce or put the metal arming in the places that need it most. Because I hate saying it, but the people that are getting taken out aren't you and me, Sean. Somehow, some way, like you said, we've learned how to survive. We've made it. We're those B-2 bombers that are coming back, even though shot up. We made it back. So reinforcing us or in our bullet holes doesn't do us any good. We need to give it to the other 95% that are the ones that are at risk, that are going down and are, being shot out of the sky, for lack of better words.
It is beautifully said because you're right. I've struggled with both of those facets for a long time. Is how do we educate them on drugs and alcohol, and how do we educate them on money? Right. And I'm fortunate because I'm married to and ran into a financial advisor. Okay, that is the only reason that I probably sit here before you. She didn't drink and she barely used drugs. So when I met her and I was a drop dead drunk, came home drunk one night, and she's like, I'm never going to do this again. So sorry to do this to you, but you're going to have to choose me or the booze. I was like, easy. Gave up booze. Let's stick with her. And then, months later, I said, hey, I'm kind of bored. Do you mind if I have a beer? She's like, just don't ever do that again. That was 20 years ago, right? So I think support is a big thing. I think education is a big thing. Patrick, what else is a big thing to helping our industry understand? Yeah, fuck, Patrick, this whole thing gets bad for me, dude, because now that you and I have talked as we have, I've become sort of a Patrick, I've become kind of a rehab hater, dude. I don't mean it like that. It sounds so terrible. So please don't DM me and tell me all about how the Lord makes a difference. That's not what I meant. What I meant was I just don't know how to balance the idea of being powerless. I've told you that from the first time I met you. There is nothing that I am powerless to in this world, my man, let alone an addiction. How can we help people see all sides of the discussion, I guess is what I'm asking, Patrick.
Okay. That's
I love that.
That's a good question. Yeah, you don't want to lead with powerless in the car industry.
Right? I won't be able to tell guys how to close car deals. They have to have all the power.
I can explain it, but I'd rather leave it for later. Because you don't want to lose your audience in the first second. So yes.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna put a note. I'll follow up with you about minute 36. How's that? Is that working for you? We'll come back over halfway, huh? All right.
The single solution is we are powerless, but we are not helpless. But still, that's confusing. So it's just not necessary. What's necessary is what we've been missing as a culture for anybody and everybody. It's just we have a nice laboratory in the car business here. Is what is the cause of this thing? What is it really? And we've just never been able to get our collective minds around that because treatment is imperative when people are, in jeopardy to the extent that severe drug addiction or alcoholism does. I met a guy, good guy, tree surgeon, enjoyed life. He looked like Colonel Sanders. He had white hair and he was a white guy, but you couldn't tell. I mean, he's been sunbaked for all his life because he worked outside in Florida. And he had his favorite bar there, and he would go there, and he tried to extend his tab one day, and he was causing more trouble than he's worth. So they said, "No, you cannot have any more money from us, and you're a pathetic alcoholic. Go home and do something about it." And I hurt his feelings, and so he went home, and I met this guy in a meeting. I mean, he went to pick up a chip. He goes, "A year ago, I was in the hospital because I went home, put my arm across the stump, and cut my arm off. And the neighbors were alarmed, so they called the police, and they choppered me over to Miami-Dade, and they sewed my arm back on. And since then, I haven't found it necessary to have a drink or drug." And it was like, and I was a young, ungrateful newcomer, not listening to anybody, but I was like, what did he say? And you start to get an idea of the kind of psychic pain. The people who are trying to fight life and life fights back and they get into survival mode because it feels like they're winning the fight, suffer from psychic pain. Psychic pain is different from regular pain. You can only hurt so much before you pass out or die. Psychic pain is not like that. There are no boundaries. And that's why it's hard to change, and that's why it's hard to do a lot of things, including survive when that's the only goal. So the idea is, what are the pieces that put that kind of attitude together? And we've had very close models, but it's only till recently we've gotten into this human affective risk response system. And then we can tell what people use to make risk benefit choices. And it turns out we're very good at it. And that's why it's helpful to have salespeople in the car business. Because when fear gets involved, Fear actually comes from the risk response system. It's not just an emotion. It's not a cognition. It's not something we think of. It's how we're organized in our what we think is important. And you take that and you look at that, and then you're free to do whatever it is you want. And it's a very simple model. And if you work it one way, it's going to kill you. And if you work it the other way, you're unbeatable.
See, now this is something
So
Jonathan and I can get behind, Patrick, because in our industry, it's all about working your pay plan, right? And so we can we can get behind, and simple the better, my man. Always with us, car guys for sure. I think that the risk response piece is something that is, I think it's kind of at the cornerstone of the training. If you were going to talk to people, would you agree, Jonathan, in what you've been looking at and reading from Patrick thus far?
100%. I don't think it's something that we even can begin to understand. It's never been explained to us. Definitely hasn't been explained to us in the way that, that he brought it forth to me. When you, not going back to your original statement, not wanting to upset anybody, but when Patrick told me, he said the average person has to go to rehab 6 times before it actually hits, and that it's more designed as a money making system than it is to actually get you healthy. I kind of had that same response. I was like, oh my gosh, and then I started thinking about all the people who've been to rehab and how many times they've been, and still it hasn't stuck. And the reality is that risk reward has yet to actually implant and grow in their mind, right? The psychological pain that he's talking about has yet to get to the point where the reward has, or the risk factor has outweighed the reward. And so it's really going to take a completely different process and method than the way that this country is actually going about. And let's just be honest, the 5% of us who are the full-blown addicts, hey, it's not designed for us. We're the ones that we'll go to rehab 6 times, 8 times. I know a guy that's been there 33 times and it still hasn't stuck. And so, lucky for him, he's still alive. But the reality is we need to be talking about the other 95% that are at the greatest risk, because saving the 5% just doesn't even put a dent in the problem that we've got in this country.
No, I agree, and I think you talk about the way that you talk about the risk reward, right? I think people who continually stay in that cycle, and again, please, everyone, no one is talking bad about rehab. We're simply trying to have an adult discussion about alternative ways to make this country better, because frankly, the numbers prove that our current design has failed us. Let's be honest. Like the amount of, it's no different than our prison system. The amount of recidivism that happens within our rehab systems is a joke. Okay. And now I have great friends who have gone through rehab and have licked it one time. And okay, awesome. Awesome. But what I want to talk about is the risk reward that you brought up, is because, Jonathan, it's not part of the education in rehab. Okay. There is nothing about risk or reward. It's about penance. It's about making yourself feel, again, it's, if they're held in the church basement, it's not like any, I'm just saying here. So we have to separate church and state here, in my opinion. This can't be of a higher power. And again, this is not a religious discussion. This is a humanity discussion. Patrick, am I losing my mind here trying to separate these two, or am I just crazy? What you're smiling, but you're always smiling. So is that something I said?
Yes. I mean, that's a good question. And that's one of the questions that I'm trying to answer in a more scientific method. I love the cartoon where the guy's got an invention and it's like step 2, miracle. And then the other scientist is like, can you expound on that step 2 a little bit more? We need to understand how it works a little bit more to make it efficient here. So it's the same thing. Is there a God? Well, that's the thing about God, is it's my choice, nobody else's. And I separate AA or any 12-step group from any treatment center. And I don't mind that treatment centers refer people to 12-step groups. That's generally how it works. The treatment centers aren't in the basements of churches. AA is. And the thing about AA is that they sort of know what to change. Treatment centers really don't. And this is where the prehab model comes in. I want to be as specific as possible as what to change instead of just saying a miracle. I'd say, here are the things you're responsible for. If you don't change these things, you're screwed. But if you don't know what they are, how can I ask you to change them? So if you don't know what you don't know, so they get caught in that change trap. Change is a must. Okay, well, we got to change. And if you're just changing the flavor of alcohol, that's not gonna.
I mean, right? That's the newest thing I'm hearing, Patrick. People are like, okay, I've given up spirits, and now I just drink beer. And I'm like, okay, all right, but why? Why did we have to give up spirits, right? I mean, I used to do cocaine. I don't anymore. Okay, so it's like, but I have reasons for doing that. So you're right. There's no, Jonathan. Doesn't it make you feel like you're just listening to a car training seminar when it's just like, so we don't do this and we don't do that and we don't do this and it's because we don't do it. We don't do it. We don't take the time as people in our industry to educate for any part of it, let alone to say to you, what a guy has a bad month. What do? We walk over, we tell him, hey, you need to sell more next month. And that's it. And we walk away. And there's no how, there's no where, there's no, hey, you screwed up here, you got weak here, you could no. It's fucking just go be better. That's what I feel like the rehab is. It's like, yeah, go out there. We gave you those tools, but there's nothing. Rehab is not reality, right, Patrick? So like when you get out, you leave, it's like vacation. I don't mean it that way, but your mind is different on vacation. Your mind is different in a facility surrounded by the same thing. I'm saying the same thing because yeah. Go ahead, Patrick.
I worked in a treatment center for a while, and I had a guy who got his change. He got his psychic change. He went and did all 12 steps and said, I get life now, and I can be an adult now and have an adult relationship with God and all that. And he went home, and his wife was smoking a cigarette. He says, you ought to do something about that addiction. She looked at him and said, you know what? I think I will. You take.
Patrick, you hit mute.
You hit mute. We lost you. I'm the best part.
I thought, Patrick, you hit mute. I thought you were doing it for effect. I thought he was swearing. I thought he was going on some sort of a tangent. Oh, Patrick, what did you just say? You were on mute.
I'm on my phone. Somebody tried to call.
So right. You were talking about the woman and the addiction. You said right when you said what the woman was going to do about the addiction, you cut out.
Yeah, she said, fine, you take care of the kids and you pay the bills, and I'll go take it easy for 90 days in a treatment center and handle my addiction.
Plus, that story reminds me to tell everyone that there's nothing worse than the recently converted, okay? There's nothing. So if you just got out of rehab and you see me drinking a booze or having a joint, please save the lectures. I'm cool. I'm a 40-year-old adult. I know how to operate my life. I do appreciate it though. But no, there's nothing worse than the recently converted for anything.
So can I
when you hear about addiction, right? From your perspective, and you look at the car business, what do you think you've done to be part of the 5%?
Well, so I think it is a little bit of nature, right? I think that because here's the thing is I am going to be addicted to work. I've got 5 kids. Apparently, I was addicted to having children. I've been addicted to, making money. I've been addicted, when I work out, I get obsessive compulsive about it. When I read, I go through books like there's nothing in my life that I don't perform at that would be considered an addictive level.
Yeah, I call it an addict of life. That's what I am. Doesn't matter what I put myself into. I am an addict of life. I love what I love a lot.
I think, at risk of having a lot of people being mad at me, I've been through rehab twice myself. And so coming out of rehab, as you say, like they call it a pink cloud, right? And then all of a sudden that cloud goes away and you enter back into reality and life starts to hit you in the face. And even being through it twice, recovering addict, an alcoholic, I've never been able to catch on to AA either. God-fearing man, religious man, but never has that ever set hold and made a difference. However, I'll tell you one thing that did is when I heard this quote, it said, an addict is willing, addiction is described best as risking everything for one thing or risking one thing for everything. And that set in so much more to me than anything I ever learned in rehab or AA or anything. That, hey, I was willing to risk everything I had for my drug of choice, or I was going to be willing to risk my drug of choice to have everything. And so when it was explained the risk reward factor, that's why when Patrick had we had talked about this, I went, that's exactly it. That's why that quote hit me so hard, was because I needed to understand what, by using alcohol, what I was willing to risk and to give up. Because otherwise, like you said, I managed to function on alcohol and doing my job and doing a lot of things pretty successfully while doing that, but
Winning.
yet was risking so much
Yeah.
in doing that, right? And it wasn't until like that really sunk into my head that, hey, you're risking your marriage, you're risking your children, you're risking your job, you're risking driving drunk and killing yourself and other people. Oh, wait, you're right. Maybe I should risk alcohol and not risk everything else, but that's what really sunk into me. So despite all the rehab and all the AA and everything else, it never affected me like that quote did.
I mean, that's a great part of it too, right? Is that you can see it and you can say to that, the way you just described it was so simple, right? It's like, look, you can either have alcohol, cool, and all the bad that comes with that, or you could not and avoid all of these other parallels that will come with it, right? And as Patrick said, winning, if you can do it all without noticing it, then you're winning. My dad is someone who has explained to me, I mean, he's a 30-year recovering alcoholic, and he went through the stages, and he's all the AA guy, all that, but he's not a chip guy. He's not like that. He did it and he handled his own business. And when I approached him and I said, "Hey, Pops, I think I want to drink. I've been sober now 6 months and I'm just kind of bored. But I think I can go back and, I can dabble." And he looked me dead in the eyes. He goes, "Dabble?" I go, "Yeah, have a drink or two." He goes, "That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard." I go, "What do you mean?" He goes, "You buy a 30-pack, you drink a 30-pack. I'm like, whoa. No way. Like, I don't roll that way. And he's like, "What's the point?" He's like, "Why let alcohol hit your lips? You're not going to black out and wake up tomorrow and forget everything." I'm like, whoa, dude, it's no wonder you have to be sober. So I don't want to make it sound like everyone can have autonomy and live with all of their addictions. That's not this, people. What I'm trying to say is that everyone is different. So it is okay if you think you are someone that can, right now it's big, it's popular to say California sober, right? So no alcohol,
Yeah.
just a little pot. Okay,
Little
I don't.
high, yeah.
You would much rather everyone who's an alcoholic in this country turn into a pothead. Okay, you just would.
Yes.
Everyone would rather that be the case, but it's not. But people say, well, it's one addiction for another. Okay, but most people have something they're addicted to: caffeine, sex, children, as just Jonathan points out, whatever, or fancy houses. These are different addictions.
I'm addicted to air.
Right? And you love a good breath of air. You know what I mean, Patrick Moore? And you go out and you take it with responsibility, right?
I try not to use it all up at once.
Oh man, you guys got me going here. All right, we're gonna do this. We're gonna keep the show rolling. We're gonna work this into show number 2. So you guys hang around, and we're gonna do this again for another 30 minutes. This has been a blast. I want to get back to Patrick. You're gonna have to answer the question about how we got here and how we fixed it, though. I'm not. You're off the hook long enough now, my friend. All right, everybody, thank you so much. We are going to be right back here. It's just to break it up for a week. Nobody sits through an hour of anything anymore. So we'll see you back here next week talking all things addiction with Jonathan and Patrick. Thank you all so much. We'll see you next week.